when the was launched.
It's my pleasure to have you speak on AF24 Talks. As usual, my name is Dr. Olabisi Folutile. So we are going to be starting on this note. 2026 is a pre-election year, and we've been seeing a lot of activities, intensified activities along political lines of recent. In fact, we see what is happening in Rivers State, and it's almost all opposition governors have joined the ruling party. Do you foresee any form of activity alongside the economy in this year? Do you foresee any form of economic growth in Nigeria this year with the rates at which politicians are just struggling and scrambling for whatever it is in 2027?
Well, thanks for having me. Typically, when you have electioneering activities, getting elevated, it normally causes distraction to governance. And that has always been the case. But what is likely to be different this time around is that we already have some fundamental reforms, and some of those reforms, those key ones, are not reforms that are easily reversible, irrespective of the likely distractions that political activities can cause, And those reforms are very fundamental to the progress that you have made as an economy. The progress around stability of the economy, the progress around even some fiscal, improvements in terms of revenue and all, and generally in terms of the general level of confidence in the economy. So if there are any distraction, it's not likely to be very fundamental, And the way the electioneering process is going, with all the, defection here and there, and the somewhat dominant stature of the ruling party, I don't want to predict, but the election may not be as hotly contested as what we had in the previous election. That is also a possibility, unless something fundamental goes wrong. But generally, there will be distractions, but it's not likely to be very, very fundamental, as to cause a major problem for the economy. And another very important thing is that the fact that we have a CBN governor who is completely apolitical. He's very professional. He doesn't take dictations, even from the president.
You think so?
Yes. He's very focused, and that has been his attribute even when he was a governor, when he was a commissioner in Lagos State. He's very, very professional. So to that extent, the kind of intrusion or the kind of influence that we had in the past, when the government or the executive was interfering in what was happening at the CBN, that is not likely to happen. I know the CBN is very central also to the stability of the economy. It's very central to the confidence building of investors. So if we still have somebody of his type, I'm talking of Olayemi Cardoso, remaining as the CBN governor, we are not likely to see any major impact of governance or politics on the CBN. And that will help, to ensure that you have credible economic governance process, even in a pre-election year.
Okay. So now, how will you assess the impact of Tinubu metrics on Nigeria's economy? Because I hope you understand what I mean.
Yes, maybe it's Tinubu
Tinubu.
Okay. Yes. Well, the Tinubu nomics is about the reforms. essentially. Okay. Because the difference that he has brought to the management of the economy is rooted in the economic reforms. Economic reforms in the oil and gas, which is essentially about the fuel subsidy removal. Reforms in the area of the foreign exchange, which is essentially about the unification of the exchange rate. Those two reforms had very profound effects on the economy. In 2023 to 2024, the impact of those reforms were very, very severe. The shocks on the economy were very, very severe because it led to a major spike in prices. It aggravated the level of poverty. It affected the cost of business operations. It led to high level of inflation. In fact, some businesses left the country as a result of the reform. Many businesses, as at last year, many of them, so as at 2024, many of them declared huge losses, again, arising from the shocks of the reform. But by 2025, the economy began to gain stability. Confidence started to return. Major players in the economy and even the citizens began to adjust. So at the close of 2025, the level of adjustment has improved significantly. The level of stability in the economy has also improved. The level of confidence has also become, significantly elevated. So when we look at the economic philosophy or the economic policies of the Tinubu regime, I think it has brought a lot of stability. And of course, the reform were also meant to correct some fundamental distortions in the economy. So that correction came with a lot of pain, which everybody acknowledges. Even as we speak now, there are still many people and many businesses that are yet to recover from those pains. And that is why a lot of people are still saying that this reform should allow the benefits of the reform to trickle down. People want to see an improvement in the welfare. So that is why we are still having that conversation. That the dividend and the benefits of the reform should not only translate to revenue gains from government, state government, and it should also translate to an improvement in the welfare of the people. So that is the current conversation and debate, how to make that happen.
And we get there even in the course of this interview.
Yeah.
Now, the KPMG released a report a few days ago that outlined what they see to be errors and inconsistencies in the new tax reforms. Have you had a chance to read it, and what are your thoughts about it, about that report?
You see, the totality of this conversation around tax and taxation, I must confess, they are very technical things.
Okay.
They are also a bit complex. There are some aspects of the tax legislation that unless you're a tax person, you may not even understand what they're talking about. But, given the stature of KPMG, for KPMG to raise issues or to point to some areas that needed some observation or that needed some attention or correction, I think they must have done their homework. So the issues they raise are not issues that we should just dismiss. Because KPMG is a very professional organization. They are not frivolous. And they will not talk just for the sake of talking. They will not talk to undermine the reform. So I believe that they did it in good faith. Although I see the reaction from government, from the fiscal policy, well, maybe that is expected. Especially because KPMG also went public.
Exactly.
I think from a strategy point of view, maybe they wouldn't have gone public with it. I would have just communicated to the government.
But the
and
public wouldn't also have known anything about it. So they did the right thing, in my own opinion.
Well, it is neither here nor there. Because the way it has been taken, it's as if
it's against government.
Against government, or they want to undermine the reform, they want to, undermine the credibility of the totality of reform and even the government. But these things can be misinterpreted.
Yes.
But I believe that they acted in good faith, and the issues they raised, I think they are worth looking at rather than just dismissing those issues, completely. I'm sure the reaction came because, again, the KPMG made it public.
Yeah.
And some people also have argued that KPMG should have made this available during the engagement period.
Okay.
Before these things were passed into law. Because in fairness to the Fiscal Presidential Committee on this tax, they did a lot of engagement with professional bodies, with the private sector, with one man of them. For almost 6 months or one, they were engaging.
But you also know that in spite of that, even the National Assembly members still said that what came out, that was what was gazetted, was not actually what was agreed upon. So it's possible also, don't you think it's possible that KPMG might also have made some contributions even during that process?
Well, I wish they had also made it public at that time.
Okay.
You understand that, okay, there is this ongoing proposal to reform the tax. These are our views on the proposals on the table.
Yeah.
That could have been taken differently than when the thing had been passed into law. We now came up with it. But whatever it is, reform is a journey.
Okay.
The tax reform is also a journey. And there is no reform that is perfect. So my expectation is that as we progress with the implementation of the reform, we should also be ready to continuously fine-tune the reform. Because, we are talking about fundamental reforms. We are talking about document that runs into almost 5,000 pages or so. You cannot spot everything. Especially given the speed with which the whole thing went. So it is as we progress and as we also experience implementation, that is when some of the gaps will now begin to manifest. And at that point, I expect that we should also be ready to continuously, review it, modify it in the light of experience and in the light of feedback that we get, from players in the economy and even the citizens.
Yeah. Even your own organization a few days ago, the CPP, raised some issues about the tax reforms and how it could criminalize 40 million informal businesses. That statement was signed by you as the CPP CEO. So can you briefly just explain the thought process?
Now, the thought process is that, first, this economy is about 50% informal. And the informal sector accounts for about 90% of the jobs in this economy. This is even according to statistics by the NBS. So it shows how very critical the informal sector is. Now, if you look at the tax reform in its current structure, it's a bit technical, it's a bit complex, so that even those who are educated are struggling to digest it.
Exactly.
Not to talk of people who are in the informal sector. Most of them are not quite literate. Most of them don't have financial literacy. Many of them don't keep the kind of records that tax officials will want to see. Most of them are not used to paying the kind of taxes that you want them to be paying now. And many of them, like many other Nigerians, are yet to recover from the shocks of the current reforms. Then there is also the issue of trust. Because for many citizens, Once they hear reform is synonymous to harsh, given what they have gone through. And also given the fact that all the promises that was made about the reform that will improve their lives, not much of that has manifested. So when there is an issue of trust, it has a foundation. So coming from that background, it is naturally very challenging to come with another major reform and tell them that no, those people who are poor will not be affected. Because of the trust deficit, not many people will.
Yeah.
So the point you were making in that press statement was that we should make it slowly as far as implementation is concerned. Because the informal sector they have not been able to digest all this talk about reform. And because of the complex nature of it, it will even make them even more suspicious. Because when you don't even understand what they are saying, the only thing you are hearing is tax. Tax. And tax is synonymous with the fact that somebody is coming to take more money from you. Even all the efforts by the presidential committee, by government, to convince people that the small business will be exempted, this and that, they are not believing it. So the point that we are making was that in matters like this, you have to be very pragmatic. And as a starting point, as a first step, leave the informal sector alone. Focus on the formal sector. And in any case, the formal sector, even though they may not be more than maybe 30 or 20% of the economic players, they give you the largest revenue. They give up to 80% of the revenue, even currently. So in line with what we call Pareto principle, our advice that they should just focus on those and leave all these market women, cattle sellers, spare part sellers, our people who carry Baluko, Onisha market, Saboge, leave them alone for now. So that you don't create unnecessary anxiety and panic. And it has already happened. I was reading in one paper today, just today or so, that prices are already even going up in some places. Because there is this rumor that tax is coming.
Yes.
So you better add something to.
Even services, things are going up. They are saying that they have to include the tax settlement.
Exactly. So people are not even talking about the fact that a particular group are exempted, a particular group is not. They don't even understand. All they are hearing that tax is coming. And price is already going up. So this is the point we are making. Because you have to calibrate a reform to reflect the kind of society in which you are. To take account of your local peculiarities. The reform in its current package is very good for an economy that is very advanced. Because everybody is supposed to find returns. Whether you are a tomato seller, whether you are selling like Shendi in Balogun, you are supposed to find your returns.
If guys all these how do they call those businesses? The business registration.
Yes. All these micro enterprises, yes. You are supposed to file returns. That's what is in the law. Even if you are exempted, you still have to show a record that your turnover is below so. Your asset is below so. But there must be a record.
But people are like, where is the money to even hire an auditor that will help us to do all this record?
That is another challenge. Because we assume that every business can just do those things. But it's not like that, given the structure of our economy. So these are peculiarities that we need to take on board before we move aggressively on implementation. Now, some of the narratives have gone so far now that even to correct those narratives, it's a challenge. Because people are already factoring the tax. Even those who will not pay the tax, they're already factoring it into prices. And that is also not good for a government in a pre-election year. From a political point of view, from a political strategy point of view, I don't think it's a wise thing. You want to do a major reform, you do it in the early days of the administration. Just as the government did for the first subsidy, I did. So that with time, people will get adjusted, things will normalize, and if you're able to bring some benefits, people may even forget the pain.
Maybe this administration really has little or few options, in the sense that except it wants to wait till the second term, which is actually not sure of getting. Maybe the president just felt, let me just do everything in my head during this chance that I have. Otherwise, one would have expected that this should wait till 2027 after he's re-elected for another 4 years. Maybe you can just bring this on board.
No. I believe that the administration is very confident that they will get a second term. I believe so. But I think they were anchoring this on the fact that they'll be able to, convince the populace that this is for your own good. Because in fairness, if you look at the reform, there are some exemptions here and there, exempted from personal income tax, exempting small businesses from company tax, from VAT and all of that. Those things are there on paper. But the reality is that many of the small businesses are in the informal sector. They have not even been paying this in the first place.
Exactly.
So you are not saying anything. So the only thing they are getting is that maybe you want to come out.
You will now collect something that we've not been doing
that you
before.
have been doing. Because many of them are actually beyond the threshold of this exemption. If you take all these our Igbo traders in Alaba, Ladipo, the volume of business they do, it's already above the 100 million turnover threshold annually.
Exactly.
So automatically,
they fall within
the people that should pay VAT. They are not selling agricultural products or health products. They fall within the bag of people who have to pay company tax. And they have to file returns for company tax. They have to file returns for VAT. And there are penalties if you don't do that. So these are peculiarities. So that is why I feel that from the get-go, strategy for now that is even a law, fine. You cannot change the law immediately, but at least the implementation has to be done in a way that it doesn't elicit too much of a backlash. And unfortunately, it's already having that backlash. So the implementation has to be done very, very strategically and very, very pragmatically. So that it doesn't create problem, either social problem, economic problem, or political problem. So our own emphasis was the fact that we have a large informal sector. And because of the nature of this reform, because of the level of literacy, because of the fact that many of these businesses are not even keeping accounting records in the way that the tax authorities can use it, it's better to suspend implementation on those sectors. So that was the cross of the line.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you mentioned the issue of trust deficit when it comes to tax issues in Nigeria, because people just believe that government is not doing enough. Look at our infrastructures, for example. There are so many infrastructural gaps here and there. People still provide their own water, they provide their own roads and all of that. Do you think this new tax reform is going to change anything in this, when we look at the issue of infrastructures and all of that? because they tell you that there has always been tax, and these things are not in place. Why should Nigerians expect something different, even with these new tax reforms, in when it comes to issues of providing infrastructures?
Well, some people have argued, at least those the key proponents of the reform, that this is a chicken and egg situation. Which one comes first? You need the revenue to fix the infrastructure. You need the infrastructure to convince people that you are doing something. So which one comes first? So the argument of the promoters of this tax reform is that let us have the revenue, then we will account for it by providing this. That we need revenue to provide the services. But again, those who are also skeptical are saying that the reform that we did, we were able to get some revenue from it. And say that the process of reform will be used to benefit us. What do you have to show?
Mhm.
So there are arguments on both sides. And that is where the challenge of trust is. And without trust, it's very difficult to push to a major reform like this. So the government has been doing its best to convince the citizens that this is for good and all of that. But again, already there is all manner of apprehension, all manner of anxiety on where the place. People are already reacting to it, factoring the tax into their prices and so on and so forth. So it's a major governance challenge, which I believe that because the trust, in all sincerity, the majority of the citizens, the trust is still not there. And to convince people that this give them something, even those that are supposed to benefit from the reform, they still don't believe that they are going to benefit. Because there have been quite a number of exemptions, you know. So the trust factor is a major factor. So the government have been trying a lot of sensitization campaign, all sorts of things are going on. So we just hope that we'll get some results from that.
Okay, now the cost of living is still high. Ask people about it, and I can tell you, as someone on that band, this last December, because my children came home for holiday, we both we spent close to 350,000 on that 3 weeks, just simply because ACs were on and all of that. And it's crazy. Cost of transportation is still high and all of that. Now, the minimum wage hasn't solved any problems. 70,000 naira. And how many companies are even paying that minimum wage apart from government establishments? So, in all of this, what is the way forward for Nigerians? What is the way forward?
Well, this is the point you have made is all about it's about governance.
Mm.
It's about issues of affordability. It's about the cost of living challenge that we have. And in fairness to governments, they have been trying to address the issue of affordability.
In what way?
Uh, first of all, the stability that we have seen in the exchange rate
Okay.
is gradually impacting prices. It may not have had that profound effect, but it's also reflecting already on prices. Because there was a time our exchange rate was around 1617. Today, it's about 1,450, 440, 420, 420. That range.
Okay.
So the problem that has been made around the stability of the exchange rate is impacting prices very, very. And even if you look at specific prices, even in December, some products prices came down. Some, like for instance, the price of rice, which people reference, frequently. I mean, bag of rice 55,000, maximum 60, depending on grade.
Nigeria is so interesting, sir. In that when we talk about prices going down, we always forget that this 55,000 we talk about in less than 3 years ago was not even up to that amount. Maybe it was in the range of maybe 20, 30,000. Then when the president came on board, it went to 100,000, over 100,000, then came back to 55,000. And we now see 55,000 as stability, forgetting that a year before he came to power, that price was probably in the range of 20 something thousand naira. So,
well, that's another way of looking at it. But the point to note is that 2023 was a major policy transition point. It was a point at which the government tried to fix some dysfunctionalities in the economy. It was a point when the government was trying to fix a broken system. So it was a major year of economic transition. And it was inevitable that those things have to happen. Fuel price and exchange rate, those things. Because if you had continued on those paths that the president, Antonio President Tinubu inherited, the economy would have practically collapsed. That is my own personal view. So what was done was to redeem the economy. Because the economy was already at the brink. Our net reserve was less than $5 billion, which cannot even do 2 months imports. But those information were concealed. Like we have created such a panic that we have found ourselves in a situation like Venezuela or like Zimbabwe. So it was a turning point, and frankly, we didn't have much choice. So that is what was responsible for that. But what I will say is that you compare what we have to the period when this reform started, you appreciate that things are getting better from that point. That is the way I will personally look at it. Actually, there was a time, people like us are old enough, when people are buying brand new car for 10,000 naira. I'm sure some of your young people here will not even, they won't believe it. Brand new car, 10,000, 6,000. This ain't Nigeria. At least I'm not yet 70. At least I experienced it. So it's not as if they are talking about something in a different century. But these are evolutionary processes. So the point I'm making is that the cost of living thing, there's still a lot more work to be done. Even though some progress has been made, arising from the fact that inflation was decelerating. Although some people argue that they don't agree with it, but some of us believe that there's been a deceleration in the inflation rate. Exchange rates stabilized and it's even gaining some strength. Confidence has been improving, but the cost of living is still high.
Yeah.
So the government needs to address the issue, specific policies now, to fix the issue of the cost of food, the cost of transportation, the cost of healthcare, the cost of education, and the cost of housing. These are specific policy interventions that are necessary. This is beyond the general macroeconomic conversation. There has to be specific intervention, both from monetary policy, from fiscal policy, and from our trade policy, to address those specific things, so that people can feel. And in trying to fix those things, the government must also be ready to trade us from revenue.
Okay.
Because if they are putting in import duty taxes on some of these things, those prices will not come down. But if you give up part of it, and even if you subsidize it, why not? All over the world, people subsidize agriculture heavily. Government subsidize transportation heavily. So if the government can do that, then people will begin to feel some relief. And this is not just only about the federal government.
Yeah.
It's also about the state government. It's also about the local
The
government.
local governments, exactly.
Because all of them are beneficiaries of the reform.
Yes.
Because their revenues have increased. So that benefit should also trickle down to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the way, because these are the areas where people spend their money.
Yeah.
You know? So relief in those areas will make a lot of difference.
Thank you so much. So what do you think? What are some lessons you think young business owners and startups need to imbibe in the current landscape of Nigeria today?
Well, for small businesses, first of all, I must say that given the size of our economy, there are a lot of opportunities in this economy. People who are smart enough to identify opportunities, even in spite of all these problems, they are doing very well. If you are very diligent, very conscientious, and you have good business judgment, and you have passion for what you are doing, there are opportunities in this economy. By virtue of the size of the market. Though people say there is poverty, yes, even in poverty, people still buy things. At least people will wear dress, they will barb their hair, they will wear clothes, they will go, they will take transportation, whether it's on Okada or something, you know. They send their children to school, all sorts of things are said there. And they eat. And how people, even in spite of this, throwing all sorts of parties, also, I mean, people have to provide those services.
Yeah, that's
So those opportunities are there. But for businesses, people also have to know what they like to do and what they have the capacity to do. Because what many people do is that they just copy and paste. You know, somebody is doing something, you feel that it's making money, you just go and set it up. By the time you set it up, you discover that it's not working as well as what you saw. So it is important that as small businesses, we understand the environment, we also understand our own strengths. And we know how competitive we are. We know what passion we have to drive whatever initiatives that exist. You know, not everybody have the same talent. So that recognition of the individuality as entrepreneurs is important. So having said that, that is talking about the internal factors, what you call the internal environment of your business. How you understand opportunities, how you understand your customers, how you manage the business. It's an internal process. That is why you see two people doing the same business in the same environment, one will be thriving, another one will collapse. Something must have accounted for that difference. The second point is about the external environment, which is what the government should provide. That is the key enablers for business. You just talk about power. There are some businesses that without power, there's no way you can break it. Because if you see you are relying on generator, diesel or petrol will consume all the money. I've seen people who are running supermarkets. And you know, supermarket is a very thin margin business.
yes.
Margin is very thin. But the standard supermarket, you must have an environment that is cool. Otherwise, you cannot come into a supermarket and be sweating. So that means you have to have power supply almost 12, 20 hours or something. Because even when you keep all those groceries in the freezer, you cannot afford to switch off your generator or something, that they go back. Some of them spend practically all their profit on buying diesel. I'm talking about this running supermarkets. The same thing with some of these small hotels that don't have the scale. Because whether you have 10 guests in the hotel or you have 100 guests, the generator must be on. Cannot be telling people that there is no power, you want to switch off. So, creating the enabling environment for SMEs to survive is extremely very important. So that's why we talk about these structural issues. We talk about power, we talk about the transportation. We also talk about financing. How do you borrow money at 30% and say you want to do business? You can't. Because it's like working for the bank or working for a finance company or whoever borrowed you the money you are working for. Because we struggle to make that kind of return. I mean, when the return on your business is not more than 10%, you are borrowing money at 30%. It's only a matter of time before the business goes on. So the government also has the responsibility to ensure that we create the enabling environment for these small businesses to be able to survive.
You once granted an interview where you said the late Alaji Nancy Yakonde is a national figure you admire and you wish to emulate. Why did you choose him as a role model?
No, Alaji Yakonde was a fantastic guy. He was a fantastic guy. Very humble and very focused. In fact, it's amazing that he spent only 4 years. And look at his footprints all over in Lagos State. Only 4 years. You know? And it symbolizes service. And he was prepared for governance. From day one, he started action. He changed all this school system, afternoon, morning. I mean, those who are old enough will appreciate this. He scrapped it immediately. He did mass housing. Many people today who are house owners, if not for Jack on day, they wouldn't have dreamt of owning a house. He was really a grassroots person in terms of devotion to governance. And he was not corrupt. For the few years I knew him as God, he was using his personal car. I still remember Toyota Crown. He wasn't staying in government, he was staying in his house in Ilupeju. How many governors can do that today? So he was such a fantastic. I wish we had more people like that. He was out only to serve the people. I mean, look at LASU, look at Lagos State University, the teaching hospital.
He also started the secretariat.
The secretariat, the LTV, you know, so many things that the man did.
Under how many years?
Yes, just 4 years. I wish he had the opportunity to serve for it if the military had not come. Unfortunately, it was this same Buhari that came and signed everybody. You know? So he was such a great person when it comes to service. But that is what public service is for. People who just come to serve. Not about himself. The man didn't have any land in Ikoyi or Lekki or anywhere. No. He was in his house in Ilupeju throughout.
And he died there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, before we wrap up, I want you to say something about what happened between recently, I mean late last year, when President Tinubu was talking. He said government met its target revenue as of August of 2025. But by the time the finance minister was before the National Assembly, he gave a different perspective. So, I mean,
I don't want to comment. I don't want to
You
come.
know what?
No, let me just leave that. Let me just leave
You
that.
don't want to comment.
I
You
don't.
don't want to dabble into what
No,
is
no.
going on. Okay.
Let me just leave that.
Okay. Now, well, let's come to insecurity.
Yes.
It's still a major problem in Nigeria, even despite Trump's obnoxious declaration of Nigeria as whatever. Do you see a connection between politics and insecurity in Nigeria?
Yes, there's a connection. There's a connection. And the connection lies in the fact that we have not had a governance structure that was inclusive for a very long time. That is what led to what we are experiencing today. Because the consequences we are suffering today are a result of 20, 30 years of neglect, of bad governance. That is what bred all these characters that have now turned to bandits, miscreants, kidnappers. Because this thing started largely from the north. Yeah. Because when you talk of poverty, when you talk of after school children, the bulk of it is in the northern part of the country. There was a time we had about 20 million images. Imagine this, all these boys that go around, you just give back to them and just dump them on the streets. Now all those boys have become adults, no job, no education. Of course, that was a time bomb. So that negligence is what is coming back to haunt most of us now. Because at that time, while in the Southwest, there was a lot of attention to education, compulsory education, even in the East and even in the Middle Belt, there was quite a lot of emphasis. But in most parts of the North, there was practically no attention to it. The elites were completely disconnected from the generality of their people. As a lot of this hegemonic kind of structure. So we didn't have an inclusive governance system that brought everybody on, that was very deliberate in ensuring that the children of the poor and all these people are properly taken care of, especially building their capacity. So that is a major governance failure that has brought us to this. And the thing that is happening so big now, to correct it now has become extremely difficult. Because all those boys have grown up, they have become very wild, they have been exposed to all manner of ransom, incredible amounts. So what are you going to do now to reverse that? People talk about non-kinetic and somebody has been taking a ransom of 100 million, 50 million. What job do you want to give to the person? So we are paying for a major governance failure, cumulative governance failure of many years back. That is what we are paying for now. Because if you had a situation where most of those people were educated, at least their sense of judgment, they'll be able to be more creative and do something. They'll not be so easily available for even those who are evil minds to recruit them. But when you have millions of them that were living almost a hopeless life, what do you expect? So I blame our elites, particularly from the northern part of the country, for the way they have neglected their own population over the years. I'm not saying we don't have issues in the South too, but at least there was a lot more effort in the South to develop capacity in education, to develop capacity in entrepreneurship. You go to the East now, a lot of them are entrepreneurs. Go to the West, a lot of them are professionals. But there was no such conscious effort. So it's not that just waiting on, but the damage has already been done. So that is where I find the nexus between insecurity and governance. And of course, even in tackling the insecurity, we have had a lot of issues about corruption, the amount they are supposed to use for the armed forces, and some of those monies are diverted, all sorts of allegations. And then we are getting value for money from our defense and security expenditure. It's another different conversation. But the fundamental issue is the neglect of majority of those young people at that time.
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about stability on exchange rates and inflation coming down and all of that. What do you think the CBN could be doing, going forward, just to at least maintain what we have or build on whatever achievements they've made in those areas?
Well, the CBN has been doing, it's one of the best performing institutions under this administration. One of the most professional regulatory institutions. So we must give kudos to the CBN. Of course, it's not as if they are perfect. There is still a lot more work to do. Yes, we are seeing a lot of monetary policy tightening over the last 2 years. This has led to a spike in interest rates and all of that. Many businesses are not comfortable with the current level of interest rates. Now that we are seeing a deceleration in inflation, we expect that the CBN should begin to bring down interest rates. Because you need investment to accelerate economic recovery. And you need money to invest. And if you are going to borrow money at 30%, how will you be able to invest? So if you can see that reduction in interest rates, that would be nice, especially now that inflation is coming down. Then there is also the issue about the intervention funds. I'm aware that during the previous administration in CBN, the intervention funds were grossly abused. I'm talking about this Anchor Borrowers Program, intervention fund for creative industry, all manner of intervention funds. There was a lot of abuse. The default rate was very high and all of that. So that is why the present CBN leadership decided to walk away completely, almost completely from the intervention funds. But my own view is that you cannot afford to throw away the baby with the bathwater. Let's look at it and let us see how we can restructure it so that we can give some critical sectors of the economy some soft facility, single digit, long-term loan, so that those critical sectors can also come up and contribute their quota to the economic recovery process. I mean, if you take a sector like agriculture, for instance, even at 20%, even at 15%, it's still too high for agriculture. Take manufacturing, even take investment in infrastructure. Those things require short-term, single-digit loan, long-term, maybe 20, 30 years tenor. That is the way we can energize those sectors. So those are some of the things I think the CBN should do. The CBN is doing well, at least ensuring that you have a stable exchange rate. That is very good. And also ensuring that you have you put an end to this waste and means finance. That's the printing of money. That is also a very good thing that the CBN can do. But we should now move focus to growth, to development, and to real sector development. Those ones require some special, unique intervention to support them in terms of financing.
And probably lastly, what is your assessment of Nigeria's current custom duty exchange? What they charge, their rates for goods and
well, import duty regime.
Yeah.
Well, the import duty, is a fiscal policy matter. And it is something that is managed by the Federal Ministry of Finance. They have a tariff board in the Ministry of Finance where these things are discussed. I was reading just yesterday about the latest meeting they had. I think it was decided by the Minister of State, where they are looking at how they can structure the import duty to support production. That is on the table now. It's a conversation that they are having. Because import duty should be structured in a way that you encourage domestic production. Otherwise, you have a situation where all these Asian products from China will just overwhelm the economy. The citizens may enjoy it, but those who are manufacturers, all of them will just collapse. But they cannot compete with those imported items. So there has to be that support. Import duty or what you call fiscal policy support to support manufacturing. Otherwise, our manufacturer cannot compete with those products that are imported. So we have to make a choice whether we want to industrialize or we want to continue to depend on imports. The same argument also applies to the refineries. You cannot have somebody like Dangote investing about $20 billion to build a refinery. And yet people are still bringing in cheap products from abroad. That is not the way to industrialize, and that's not the way to encourage more investment in manufacturing. So there has to be a deliberate policy to ensure that our fiscal policy, our tariff policy, are structured to support domestic production.
Thank you so much. Let me just ask this. Are we going to see you venture into politics anytime soon?
No, I'm not. I'm not. Politics is for rugged people. It's for rugged people, and I'm not. I don't have the personality fit for politics. There are people who are cut out for it. Unless I have a godfather who just carries me. I say, okay, don't worry, I will do all the for fights.
Just go there.
Just go there. All the way we take it for Fubara.
And Fubara is now showing. Thank you so much, Dr. Muda Yusuf, the CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise and former Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's been interesting speaking with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, madam. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Again, my name is Dr. Labisi Dedifolutile. Please follow us on AF24 Talks and franktalknow.com. Follow us also on our other social media handles.